Leadership is so often seen as being better than other people, so then you can have the right to tell them what to do. And I think a conversation around leadership that centers more on accountability and responsibility, the leader being responsible for the outcome of the organization or the team, is necessary. So often in my life, I've seen leaders model the idea that they're better than other people, so they get to bark orders and tell people what to do and don't have to hold themselves accountable to the same standard they hold others to because they're in a position of authority. I think that's bullshit. This conversation with Larry Hagner from The Dad Edge is all about the different leadership styles between hard leadership and soft leadership. Leadership that barks commands and is authoritarian and says, you're going to do what I say because the position I'm in is over you. And soft leadership says, as the leader, it's my responsibility to make sure this runs well. So I'm going to make sure everyone is playing their part, myself included. I'm not above the standard and I have to operate with integrity. I have to lead by example. And if I'm going to hold you to something, it's going to be because we agreed on that, not because you do what I say. This is such a difficult distinction to make because of just how much of our brain associates leadership with this authoritarian style. I hope this episode helps you to begin to consider leadership as more of a responsibility and less of a privilege. Most leaders that we see in media today are portrayed as this hard power, strong, oppressive, heavy-handed, almost patriarchal kind of leader. And it's kind of like, you're going to do what I say and you're not going to say anything about it. You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
For those people looking for a different leadership style, what are their options?
So I think you really have to understand what effective leadership is and what ineffective leadership is all about, right? And what a true leader actually does. Now, I lead my organization. So I have 100 people on my payroll. So I have 100 coaches that work for me. I've got an executive assistant who's basically also my COO. She's been with me for 6 years. She is literally the foundation of what I do. I also have co-coaches that I do other work with, like events and that kind of thing, but I'm always in that leadership position. I'm always pouring out. And I used to, years and years and years ago, before I went through leadership training and coaching training and all that, I used to think that a true leader was that authoritarian, like, I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to bark orders and you're just going to do them.
Yep.
And to be quite honest, like early in my career, so, from 2010 to 2021, actually. So just, a couple of years ago, I had a full-time job on top of this, which kind of blows my mind because I never thought that Dad Edge would actually be more than a hobby, to be quite honest. And then it turned into a full-blown, 7-figure business and organization. And I don't say those numbers to brag about the numbers, because it's never about the numbers. It's about the men, and it's about the guys we help, and it's about what we do. And I truly think that if you provide value and you change somebody's life, you can have a profound impact on their life. And then you can create, an organization around that, right? You can actually here's the funny thing about this, and I know we're getting into leadership, but I think men who are leading in careers, right? Or just, if you're in the workplace, you're a leader in some capacity. I don't care if you have bosses or you're a subordinate or if you have customers, you're leading somewhere. And what I can tell you is most men in the workplace have this perception of, I have to hate what I do in order to justify the money that I make from it. So I have to think that it's a grind, it's a burden, and it's terrible. Especially, and the more money you make, the more people feel that way. It's almost like you get like this shame stamp if you're like, oh, you love what you do and you make money, though. That's terrible. You should feel horrible about that. You charge people for something that you love, and I think that that's wrong. I had a great mentor of mine and a great leader of mine who told me, dude. And he didn't say dude because he was like 65, and he was
he's
extremely, he was extremely, right. He was extremely successful and bought and sold, 9 businesses over his career. And he said, Larry, he goes, let me tell you something. Because I told him about my perception of doing Dad Edge full time. I was like, wasn't that wrong? He's like, Larry, look, I've said this probably 1,000 times to other men just like you. When you can do the work that makes you come to life, the thing that you're truly passionate about, like your gift to the world, and you can change someone else's life for the good, and you can put bread on your table, that is the trifecta of a beautiful life. And I
Yeah.
was like, and he's like, and why would we think about it any other way? So if you lead from that place in the workplace, then you're going to be a more effective leader because you're going to do the work that makes you come alive. Even Steve Jobs said something like that. If you want to
Yeah.
do great work, do the work that you love. But,
Yeah.
going back to your question, I share that with you because and I'm leading 4 young men right now, right? My boys, right? I lead my coaches, I lead my customers, I lead my team. And what I can tell you is early in my career, when I was doing medical device sales and I was a manager and I was a director and all that, like I literally thought, well, in order for my reps to do what I need them to do, I need to bark at them. I need to tell them what to do.
Mm.
And I found that just really wasn't effective. That is a lever you need to pull every now and again. I'm not saying it's off the table, but I truly believe in that's 10 to 20% of what you need to be doing. A true leader's job is to create culture and vision and to be the example and to be very curious and be a listener and be really good at questions, because you can actually guide somebody to do what you need them to do by them stating it and not you stating it. But you have to
Mm.
be very methodical about it. And I'm not saying, I didn't say manipulative, methodical, because people are more inclined to do the right thing if they're the ones who say it out loud and not you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm happy to dissect that in any way you want.
And so that there is like that there starts to bump into some like higher ideal or vision of what it means to be a boss and be a leader.
Yeah.
Is you're not telling people what to do. Yes, you are, and you have a responsibility for the organization. You have to. There are aims, there's requirements, things need to be done, and they're going to get done. But in some regard, you begin to, as a in this form of leadership, you begin to see your work with other people as an opportunity to develop them, inspire them to think differently, critically, creatively, resourcefully about the projects that they're responsible for or the work that they're doing.
100%. I mean, you have to hold people accountable, right? That is definitely part of leadership. I'm a big fan though of holding people accountable by getting them to state it, right? Through questions, through generative questions. But let me first talk about culture. Culture is a very, very, very big deal, and I'm a huge fan of Southwest Airlines, right? I love the culture of that company. They are absolutely amazing. Another business that I'm a huge fan of is First Form. They're a supplement company. If you really look at what Andy Frisella has created with First Form, is it's not just a supplement company. It is a culture. It is a community, and it is a mission, right? To help as many people get as healthy as they possibly can, by giving them the tools and the knowledge to do so, not just selling them a supplement. But in Southwest Airlines is the same thing. It's about, bringing people joy, things that they love to do, treating their customers right. It's all those things. But let's just talk about culture as a father real quick, because I know that's kind of my shtick. If you want a house that people feel safe telling you things, right? Where they're not going to be like guilted and shamed and blamed and pained, right? So in other words, like if you have a kid that is struggling with something and you don't want them to hide it, well, guess what? You have to create a culture where it's psychologically safe and it's welcome for them to share that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
If you want to create a culture of happiness, you have to be the one that is showing other people happiness. If you want to create a culture of we forgive each other quickly, you have to forgive each other. You have to be the one forgiving people quickly. If you want to create a culture of gratitude, you have to be the one who is displaying gratitude, right? So the thing that you want to create, you have to embody it in your own culture and your own being, because people are very, very smart, and they won't tell it to your face, but they'll see it, is that if you're full of crap or not, right? So like if I say, you can tell me anything to my kid, and then as soon as he does, I just lay on layers of guilt and shame and what's wrong with you? Like we don't do that around here. Like blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then he's making a mental note of like, yeah, you're probably right. And I'm never telling you anything again. Thanks.
Yeah.
Right?
You almost reward his disclosure with punishment.
Right.
Yeah, like, great job for telling me. Now I hate you.
Right.
Yeah.
So culture is a big one, right? You have to embody whatever it is that you want in your home or in your business. You have to create that by doing that, right? You have to be the lowest heartbeat in the room, right? Another thing too is I do want to talk really quickly about there are times to be authoritarian,
Okay,
right?
please.
But I only like to use that lever 20% of the time, so where, like if like, so for instance, one of the cultures that we've created in this house is we have open and honest communication and we rarely bark orders. However, if over time, things aren't being done and accountability is getting very loose, it will probably turn into a little bit more, here and there of like, I need you to do this, period. So like, I'll give you an example. Last night, my 15-year-old was very, very frustrated. And he's very frustrated because he's playing football right now and he's a very gifted athlete, but he's very hard on himself. He's 180 pounds and he's the center on his football team. He plays center. He's a long snapper. He's on both special teams, receiving and kickoff. And they put him out on defense as nose guard when they need him to blast through the line and get the quarterback. So he's playing like a crap ton. He's like the Swiss Army knife of the team. Like, they put him anywhere and he can do it. And he's so hard on himself. And he's like, so last night we got in this conversation and he's like, Dad, I need to put on 40 more pounds. And I'm like, for what? He's like, if I don't put on 40 pounds, I'm not going to be playing, that much next year, and he's already playing a ton and the coaches love him. And he's like, if I don't do that, I was like, let me challenge that a little bit. I was like, I hear you. I was like, but does 40 pounds actually equal you being a better player? I was like, 40 pounds is a lot of extra weight to carry around. Are you going to be part of your gift is you being your athleticism. Like, he went up against a kid who was probably all of 300 pounds and he can blast right through those kids, even at the weight he is. But his thing is like, nope, 225 equals better player, period. Right. And so he kind of fought me on that. And, last night he was all up in his head and he was like, if I don't do this, and he started to like walk away, which is actually really, really rare. And I was like, Mason, come back here. He was like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. He was just very frustrated.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I can count on one hand how many times I've done this. I said, son, stop. And he goes, what? And I go, I rarely tell you this, but as your father, you need to hear me out. I need to tell you some things, right? And I sat him down and I said, I understand that we normally have conversations, but you need to hear this.
Yeah.
But I rarely do that. Yeah, I rarely do that. That's more authoritarian, right?
Yeah.
But it was also giving him the words that he needed to hear to get him thinking about some things differently versus like I could tell, I was like, if I start to use a skill set that we teach called generative questions where I'm pulling these things out of him and he's saying it, he's not going to play along. He's just in that mindset where he's just like, he's way too far down the road of self-sabotage right now.
Don't therapize me, man.
Yeah. But sometimes you have to do that.
When you talk about accountability and holding someone accountable, one thing that I notice is there's a difference in the way that authoritarian, hard power leaders and people together, power with constructive leaders, look at the accountability portion, where it's like I'm going to show up and keep a routine of sorts with, I can't remember the exact words you said or the phrase you just said, but like checking up on it or a routine around it, or what did you say?
You just have to have, so like as far as accountability goes?
Yeah, accountability.
It depends on the situation. It depends on the, accountability in the workplace is the same but different in my family. The accountability in my family is the same but different in the workplace, but it's kind of the same structure. I can talk through that.
Yeah, so like the authoritarian, that type of leadership and then accountability, they almost seem to be different in my mind because if you're just authoritarian, and it's not 20% of the time, it's 100% of the time, then you're just barking orders and you're coming around saying, did you do what I told you to do or not?
Right.
And then there's punishment. And the other alternative is the regular accountability of checking in with projects, checking in with progress, checking in even with your son. Hey, how are we looking at our situation? That, if you don't have the check-in, if you don't have the intentionality of follow-up and involving yourself in the process or in the programs or in the projects, if you're not there as part of the process, then you don't really get the opportunity to have that accountability relationship. Because that authoritarian type coming down heavy-handed doesn't have to happen if there's the ongoing conversation, if it's a check-in, if you have an employee or you have a team member and there's something that needs to be done. And when it's not done, you're present to see it and say, hey, this is a standard for us as a team or an organization, and we need to make sure this gets done. So let's do it. And with that seems to be, in my mind, one of the distinctions between kind of the more hard power leadership style versus softer and with people is being present. When you're present, you're participating with accountability in developing and allowing people to shift their focus towards the core missions of the family or the business. And when you're authoritarian, you can be somewhat absent and just come running in like a bull in a china shop and just bark and scare people back to their job. That seems to be a clear distinction for me in those two areas.
Well, I think so like for instance, if you want people to execute upon their accountability, then you have to be the one executing on yours. So like for instance, I had a one-on-one with I have a 3-man executive team, that basically manages like all of our coaches. And I had a one-on-one with one of my executive coaches last night, and we were talking through some things, and he's given some new tasks, but I also had homework for myself, that I promised him. And at the end of the meeting, I said, okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that we both know our marching orders from here. So I have agreed to do this, and do this. And then my timeline to get this done is by noon tomorrow. So you will have those things in your inbox by noon tomorrow.
Yeah.
And he's got things he needs to get to me. Now, this is where a leader really creates culture, right? So if I don't have those things to him in his inbox by noon the next day, in my mind, it actually needs to be earlier than that. I want to over deliver, right? Versus and under promise. So like if I can't hold up my end of the deal and I don't get him what he needs and I'm full of excuses, well, what does that say to him? That says we have a culture of we don't actually hold our promises, and we can, as long as we have a good excuse, we'll let it go.
And sorry to interrupt, man.
No, you're good.
That is a microcosm of sorts of what I'm sensing as we talk about this is that's like how it goes in organizations. That's like how it goes with being the winner and being the boss, being the top dog. Is you don't have to do what you said you were going to do because you're the boss. You don't have to do what you're telling people to do because you're the authority. You can do whatever you want. And that is like, I've worked with people like that. I've worked with people that they have such strong agendas and demands for you, what they need you to do, but they themselves are more scatterbrained than, a cat in a THC gummy. Like that is such a beautiful quality, man, of a leader. It's like the responsibility aspect of it. It's hard for me to articulate this, but I'm trying my best. The responsibility aspect of it is something that I'm learning more and more about leadership as I get older, is that most of the leaders I've seen in my life, most of the leaders I've looked up to in my life, especially in business, display this kind of, when you are on a higher part of the chain of command, you don't have to follow the orders. You don't have to be accountable and organized. The accountability doesn't go both ways. It's not that I have to uphold my agreements to you. It's you have to uphold your agreements to me because I'm your boss.
Right.
And it's just so ugly to do that, man. It's just so ugly to do that. I want to say, man, I admire the hell out of what you're talking about. I admire the hell out of it. And you're hitting the nail on the head in terms of drawing the line between what it means to be a leader be a good leader, really, but hard leadership style, soft leadership style. And I love the fact that we're kicking it off with starting with you have to be accountable yourself, and you have to set the example. It sounds like such a strategy, so often that it's like top 10 ways to be a leader. Here's number 1, set by example. And so you walk in and you go clean up the coffee station so people will clean up the coffee station, or like you go try to do people's jobs in front of them so they know that you'll do it too. But it's not that. It's saying that, hey, the same way, the culture, the same way I expect you to follow through with your word and take care of what is in your responsibility is the same standard I hold myself to, and it's the same standard that I welcome you to hold me to.
100%. 100%.
Awesome,
yeah, there's one other caveat to this too. So I am not a fan of because I told you so. I'm just not, because I don't, with kids, I had Jocko Willink on my podcast, and he said something that I'll never forget. And actually, we posted a short video of it on our YouTube, and most people really liked it. And then it got some really fiery comments, and you can tell what kind of parent somebody is or leader by their comments. And here's what Jocko said. He goes, if you tell your kid to do something and you say, because I told you so, or because I say so, and you literally can't articulate to them why it's important that they do it, you're wrong. You're wrong. And he didn't even hesitate. And to some parents, right, and some leaders are like, no, it's because I said so, or they do what I say regardless. And maybe there's a time and a place for that, but like I said, it's very rare, right? But you have to be able to articulate the why to the person.
That's
why
right,
it's
man.
important. And most importantly too, why it's important and meaningful even to them, right, as part of your team or part of the family. So I'm a huge fan of not I told you so, or not because I said so. I'm a huge fan of the foundation of accountability and us doing what we say we're going to do. It's within what we agreed upon.
That's
not
right,
because I said so. So it's literally, it's the agreement that holds the weight. It's not the authority figure. So for instance, we use this all the time in my family. I use it all the time in my business.
Please talk about it.
Yeah. So for instance, I give my kids, they have chores that they get paid for, and then they have, no, you do this because you're a part of the team, right? Part of their chores that they don't get paid for is everyone chips in for dinner, because it's a madhouse if we don't do that. So everyone has a role to play every single night for dinner. So on Sundays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and so basically the only night my wife really cooks is usually Mondays and sometimes Tuesdays, but I have my designated nights that I cook. If I cook, I don't clean up. She does. And if she cooks, I clean up behind her, the mess, right? My little guys, they are in charge of clearing the table, putting food in Tupperware containers that's left over, putting them in the fridge, wiping the tables off, and sweeping. My 2 older guys, they alternate on dishes. My 2 little guys, they both empty the dishwasher together. That's their job. One does the top rack, one does the bottom. So everybody has designated roles, and sometimes it changes. So for instance, my 2 older ones will alternate on the nights they do dishes, right? My wife and I alternate on days that we cook. So, but that's the agreement. So when we do these things, we're saying, okay, here's everybody's part to play this week in dinners. On Tuesday night, this is what it looks like, right? We're all agreeing, right, that we do, because we made these agreements that, okay, the big guys, they do dishes. The little guys, they empty the dishwasher and wipe off the table and that kind of thing. I cook one night, my wife cleans. So we've all agreed upon that. Now it comes down to, the date, right? And say, okay, Tuesday, here's everybody's job, right? Does everybody agree that this is their job? Yep, we all agree. And you have to have this, they say, and that's their opportunity to be like, it's actually not my turn. It's actually Ethan's turn because I did dishes last time. And you're like, you know what? You're right. That's actually right. So Ethan, are you agreeing to do dishes tonight? Because Mason did do them the last time. He's like, yeah, I got it. Okay. Everybody agrees, right? So now to hold them accountable, right? If they don't do it, which they usually do it, but if they don't do it, we say, hey, this is what we agreed upon. What about that did you not understand? Right? Or did we miss something in the agreement that you missed or we missed, right? It's all about the agreement. It's not like, hey man, you didn't do the dishes. I told you to do the dishes. You didn't do them. Well, I didn't know. Well, yeah, you did. It's because I said so. You have to do it.
Dude, I think it's so cool. I think it's so cool, man. It's so respectful. It's so respectful for those involved, for those that you're working with, despite the responsibilities and how they're divvied up, despite the responsibility that lays on you as a father for your family, despite the responsibilities that lays on the leader of an organization, that the risk that they put in financially. Yeah, these are things that they made an agreement with themselves that they're willing to do, and so they're not going to make some weird guilt, shame stamp kind of, oh, I'm the boss and I'm under stress, so you need to go do. Don't hold me to the same standard you're being held to because I'm an authority, because I said so. Just go and do it. Instead, it's saying, I love this, man. I wrote this down: authority versus agreement. I love that. It's saying that we're gonna hold the line on what we agreed on as two humans. Out of love, out of decisiveness, out of an agenda to make an impact, out of trying to have an awesome business. But we agreed. We sat down sober-mindedly, looked each other in the eyes, and said, "Here's going to be my role. Here's your role. You ready to rock?" And then and that's what we do. And then it's like, man, when you're misstepping, I mean, that's pretty cool too. Going up the chain, you go. It's not about authority here in this organization. Larry's missing the mark, man. He told me by noon. He didn't have it by noon. This is the second time this has been going on. And so, it's not he's my boss, so I'm not going to approach him on this. It's he's not hitting the agreements. This is not our culture. Our culture is we follow through with agreements. So it's what I love about this, man, is it offers a different perspective. It's exactly the question I came out with. What other options do we have when looking at leadership if we want to evolve, if we want to develop away from this militant, authoritarian, evil king kind of leader threat? Instead, our culture is not based on authority. It's a common agreement. It says we're going to work together, and this is what we're going to do. This is our roles, and we're going to hold each other to those roles. You're going to hold me to these roles. I hope so much, man. I mean, I really hope so much that the audience, people listening to this episode, watching this episode, will begin to see that those are two different paradigms you can come from. You can come from the authority, and that the authority one is kind of what we get handed. It's kind of like baked into it's what's in the media, it's what's in the movies and the TV shows. It's kind of this ongoing echo, right, from generations past. But Larry, you're doing an absolutely fucking amazing job, man. And that's one thing I wanted to make sure to just get the chance to tell you, that I really, really, really am grateful for what you're doing with the Dad Edge, what you're doing with dads all over the world, man, because you're opening people's eyes to the idea, to the opportunity that you can lead your family, your children. You can lead the people in your organization from a place of authenticity, from a place of integrity, from a place of responsibility. You don't have to see authority as being over people. You can see authority. You can see instead you can see responsibility. Like in my mind, that's one of the biggest distinctions between, in my mind, like a good king and an evil king or a tyrant. Is the tyrant is authoritarian and says that I am in a position of power, and that's why you submit to me. And the good king says, I'm the leader because I hold the risk. I hold the responsibility. That is my responsibility. That is my calling. And so therefore, I must take on the weight of developing myself as the person that can connect with my people and move us towards the direction that God or the universe has planned for me. Not out of pride and out of threat, but out of a genuine heart to truly love the people that I'm made responsible for.
100%. That was so well said, man.
Oh,
and dead on. Yeah.
And that is awesome, bro. Like, that's awesome. Here's another thing that I wanted to ask you, bro.
Sure.
Talk to me about the distinction between a winner and a leader. How society presents winners, not so much leaders. People that come to mind is like Andrew Tate is the alpha man, apex predator. and there's no family there. There's no children there. There's no good king there in my mind. What's the differences and focuses for the winners and the leaders? How would you differentiate the two, my man?
I think that's a really good question. So like, I think society looks at like quote unquote winners as accomplishments, performance, what accolades, whatever, right? Sooner or later, those accolades are going to go away. And the true leader emerges, right? And when I say true leader, do you have the characteristics of a true leader or do you crumble, right? I'll give you an example. My 15-year-old, the same one that I was talking to you about, when he was 7, he did Little League wrestling. I'll never forget that year. Like you're always really nervous when you see your little tiny 7-year-old out there on a wrestling mat. I wrestled, and I'll never forget, still to this day, seeing his first wrestling match when he was in a tournament.
Pin his ass.
Right. and I was just like, he is just going to get slaughtered out there. Like, that was my viewpoint. Like, I of course didn't say that to him, right? But I was just like, every kid loses usually their first match.
This is Colton?
No, this is Mason. He is my
okay.
He's now my 15-year-old. This is when he was 7. And he was a freaking savage. Like I think his record was 35-4. He got second in state. And he just pinned everybody. I think he had 27 pins out of 34 wins. Like, he just crushed it. And I was like, what in the heck, right? So he had all these accolades, right? All these wins, right? And you're just like, and you look at him and you're like, he's a winner. He's a winner. Like, look at him go, right?
Yeah.
Second year, he did pretty good. He came back. He got 5th in state. The record wasn't as good, but he hardly lost. Well, then the third season, they're like, okay, well, you're 2-time state finalist now, so we're going to put you in a different rank. And he just got absolutely slaughtered, and he crumbled. I mean, granted, he was 10, right? So any 10-year-old's going to crumble. But here's where, someone like, you pick anybody out there who always wins, right? Pick Mike Tyson in his prime, right? Muhammad Ali, they're always winning, right?
Yeah.
It's not, it's great when they're winning, but what happens when shit hits the fan? What happens when they lose? Like, what happens when you get a big slice of humble pie? Then your true character really comes out.
Yeah.
And here's what I can tell you about, little Mason. Mason at 10 years old, just like probably any other 10-year-old, but like, let's put it in an adult standpoint, right? When they lose, how do they respond? Was it everybody else's fault? Was it this? Was it that? Was it him? Or was there some ownership in there, right? I mean, we all thought that Conor McGregor would never be beat, right? Especially when he knocked out Jose Aldo in like 9 seconds or something crazy, right? And then he gets beat. And then you're like, wow, he's actually a human being. And here's what I can tell you about Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor, obviously there's a brand behind how he operates, right? However, I love seeing Conor lose. And I don't say that because I like to see somebody lose. I like to see, how is Conor going to respond, right? Because here's the thing. Underneath all that persona, he does take quite a bit of ownership, and he can get really authentic and quite emotional. And when he's interviewed, they're like, what happened? He'll be like, I didn't bring it. I should have worked harder. I should have done this, should have done that. There's so much ownership. It wasn't like it was my team's fault. It was the ref's fault. It was this, it was that. It's like, suddenly it's like, no, this one's on me. I could have done some things differently, and I didn't, and it's a learning opportunity. So I think truly, if you look at, so you're talking about like when we see someone winning, right? Like all these accolades and they're in the limelight. I'm more interested to see, how do you respond when you're up against the ropes? How do you respond when you get knocked down? How do you respond when you lose? Because that is when a true leader emerges, in my mind.
Yeah, you definitely can be in a winning streak and lack character. You have beginner's luck. You have a certain set of skills that have risen to the top, and so you're climbing the ranks. Like Mason did, right? And you definitely see the true. I mean, I love that you said, I love to see the man lose. I love to see the man lose, because then I get to see the man. then I get to see who I'm looking at. Because when you're winning, of course, it's easy to be on top of the world. But when you lose, your character comes out. In my mind, one of the distinctions that I draw is me versus we. And in our society, I see, especially for young men, I'm 26 years old, and for men, for women, for people that see kind of the manifestation of masculine energy being this winner. In my mind, I've thought about it like an arc as I've meditated and reflected on my own journey and the changes in me as I grow older. There seems to be a shift of sorts from win to defend. First, it's look at me, look at me. First, I attract the mate. First, I attract the wins, the resources. And then what happens? There's something that has to happen at some point when it's no longer about being the winner. It's about you have the things you've won. You've won the partner. You've won the children. You've won the resources. Now are we going to continue to try to hit that crack pipe of feeling on top of the world because we look like a winner? Or are we going to shift gears and say, thank you to God, to life, for these resources, for these wins. It's now my job to turn and defend these things. It's now my job to tend to these things and to grow those things that are given to me. I don't see, and I don't know how it would happen other than people like Larry Hagner doing the Dad Edge, how you bring awareness to that element, because a winner is like, look at me, motherfucker. You know, I'm the man you're looking for. You know, it's me. And on social media, I mean, we live in a digital world completely, man, and it's only getting more and more. And it's built for posturing. It's built for positioning yourself to be this person. And I was talking to my girlfriend last night about this topic. It's hard. It's nearly impossible to display leadership on a surface level, on a social media level, on a viral clip level, because it's hard to show. It doesn't show on the surface. It's not impressive. It's patient. It's not a showman. It's reliable, you know, and these are not in our culture, which is another reason why I said one of my intentions for this episode is that I want to inspire people to see responsible, strong, present, reliable as desirable qualities versus the look at me alpha male, you know, displayed in our culture today. In our culture, it's not admirable. We want to see, man, we want to see the fucking winners. We want to see the winners and we want to see them knock out the next guy. But the world is made up of fathers and mothers and leaders of organizations. And in my mind, dude, you're taking from your resources when you're using your time and energy to, yeah, baby, check me out. Check me out. I'm walking in. I'm the man. I'm the CEO. I'm the owner. Check me out, baby. This organization exists to serve me. These meetings exist to serve me. This jet I'm getting on exists to serve me. The people in my family, hey, I'm the man. You know, you're taking time and energy to devote to your need to fabricate this persona so you can feel good about yourself versus taking your time and energy and say, I could give a fuck. I could really give a fuck what people think in terms of whether they think I'm winning or losing. The people that I owe deadlines to tomorrow at 12 o'clock, am I getting them to them? My son, am I being there for him? My daughter, am I being there for her? My partner, am I able to be there for my partner as they express their emotions and I feel them with them or not? That's a different lifestyle, man.
100%. Are you a fan of Ted Lasso?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
Don't spoil it for me because I'm not even done with season 2 yet. So one of my coaches who works for me, he always quotes Ted Lasso, or, you know, and I'm just like, what are you quoting? And this is before I watched it. He's like, dude, Ted Lasso. And I was like, what is this deal with Ted Lasso? Like, for everybody's talking about it. They're like, and he's just like, you haven't seen it? I'm like, I got 4 kids, man. How do I even have time for TV? And he joked with me one night. He's like, Larry, there's 2 types of people in the world. Those who love Ted Lasso and those who haven't seen Ted Lasso. And I was like, okay, I'll buy it. So my wife and I one night, we were, you know, like, we'll watch a little bit of, my wife jokes with me. She's like, you're good for about 7 minutes of TV and then you pass out, which I do.
That's right.
You know, I'm out, you know, like when I lay down. But every now and again, like we're kind of on the hunt for like a good show that we want to watch, and for a while there, we got into You for like a minute, and then we got past, I think we got into the second season. We're like, this is weird. And then we just stopped watching it. We watched a few other things too. Like she was a big fan of This Is Us. So like I got into it too. But, so like, I was just like, hey, I keep hearing about Ted Lasso. Do you want to watch it? And she's like, yeah. And now we're just like, I will watch this probably at least 2 times, but
especially you, man. That's right up your alley, dude.
It really is. But like, if you look at like Ted Lasso, that guy is one of the most effective leaders I've ever seen. And it's because he has these incredible endearing traits. If you really look at the heart of Ted Lasso, right? Versus like, have you ever seen I know you're only 26, but have you ever seen the movie Varsity Blues? Yeah. Okay. So James Van Der Beek, back in the day. So this film goes back to 1999. And it's really, really good. It's a great movie. It's about a high school football team. And I can't remember the guy's name. It's Angelina Jolie's dad. That guy. I can't, but he plays the head coach. And this guy is a maniac. He is a total maniac. And the guy was this is true leadership, right? Very successful. Like won several state championships, like literally was going down in like the Texas Hall of Fame for the most wins. Like, but here's the thing. The culture of that team was so broken. The players despised him.
Yeah.
Right. And it was all about like, I don't want to spoil at the very end of the movie, but basically in the last game of the season, right? Everything's on the line. It's for state. It boiled down that the coach was so toxic to this team, even though they were very successful, that the quarterback, who's played by James Van Der Beek, looks at him and goes, if you don't leave, I will. And it was halftime for the state final game, and that was on the line. And the whole team got behind the quarterback, and they were like, you go or we go. We're not going back out there with you. And that's how broken that team was. So he left, and they ended up winning the game. So, but you look at somebody like Ted Lasso, right? He's got these core values, and he's got these North Stars of like, and he even said it in one of the episodes. He's like, my job as a coach is not necessarily to make great football players, great soccer players, right? If you're in the States, great football players. It's actually to make better people.
That's right.
That's really my job. He's like, if you help people be the best versions of themselves, no matter what you do, like if you really look what I do, right? It's not helping you be a better father. It's not helping you be a better husband. It's helping you be a better man. And by doing so, you're going to be a better father. You're going to be a better husband if you're a better human being and a better man. And obviously there's skills that go with that. But if you really look at what Ted Lasso does, is he attracts. He doesn't push. He attracts, right? And he does it in a way he doesn't enable people either. He has this incredible balance of, I'm going to love you. I'm going to support you. And I'm also going to hold you to a high standard, and I'm also going to do it with some humor, right? Yeah. But I'm going to hold you there. You are going to keep operating. You're going to get better and better and better. And, but even like, his conflict resolution was fascinating. I'm on the episode right now where his coach, Nate, ratted him out to a reporter that he had an anxiety attack for one of the games. And Coach Beard was like, you're going to talk to him about it, right? He goes, Beard, when it comes to my coaching staff, I treat them like cats and babies. They need to come to me. Yeah.
Dude, and your impersonation, by the way, is really good.
My wife calls that wasted brain space. She's like, because I have like a whole arsenal of like movie quotes, but I can never find my keys. And she just jokes about that. She's like, why do you keep losing your keys? I was like, this half of my brain is just filled with movie knowledge. Like, it doesn't have the room. But, if you really think about that, like what he did, is he really attracted Coach Nate in a way that he just kept setting the stage for him to be truthful about what happened. And then he finally was, right? And he was brutal about it.
Oh yeah.
But even the way, because he just blasted Lasso at the last episode that I saw, and the way that he handled it, he was just like, hey man, it's sorry you feel that way. Like that's tough, versus like blasting him right back. And I was like, holy cow. Like that to me is true leadership, because if you really look at what Ted does, even his boss, Rebecca, right?
Mm-hmm.
He brings out the best in her, and
That's right.
he works for her,
That's right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
And
leadership. And that's
that's
leadership.
leadership. That's leading up the chain of command and down. If you can bring the best out in people and you do it in such a way that it's not authoritative, right, or authoritarian, that's true leadership skills right there. It's easy to pull the lever of do what I say because I told you so.
Yeah, and if you don't, or else. If
right, or if you don't, or else. Versus like you create an environment where people want to do it.
I also want to highlight a specific thing, about being mindful, about taking a moment to recognize what you're associating with leadership, because something about the Ted Lasso character stands out to me. He's very unassuming. He's the best leader. I mean, it is artful. It's an artful display of leadership. It is subtle, and if you just watch it and listen to it, if you just put it on replay as your boys are doing housework, it'll get into their brains, and then it'll just be kind of who they are. Everybody needs a little Ted Lasso in them, But his character is played. I don't know the actor's name, but it's unassuming guy with a funny mustache,
Jason Sudeikis, yeah.
Jason Sudeikis, and I'm thinking, if they had The Rock play Ted Lasso, then maybe a lot more men would look at it and say, now that's leadership, because we a lot of times fixate so much on the appearance, and even in movies, it's leadership, like leadership is displayed as this muscular, impressive, alpha male, dominant, strong in terms of force, and that is not leadership. Ted Lasso does a wonderful job of displaying that. And so at times, maybe be mindful for the audience, be mindful of when you're jotting down in your mind, ooh, that's a leader. Let me put him in there. Ooh, that's a leader. Are you doing it with your eyes open? Or are you doing it with your eyes closed? Are you doing it with your heart open or closed? Are you feeling the impact that leader's having? Because that's real leadership. It's not about what they have, but the impact that they're having. It's not about how much money you have and how many employees you have and how much resource you have. I mean, those things will get you likes, followers, and applause for people, but what kind of impact are you having on those people that you're responsible for? That's the difference. One 100%. Thing that I wanted to bring up as a conversation starter too, man, about this topic is the difference. The difference, and there's one particular thing too that I know it'll be a hard topic of sorts, but I do want to bring it up because it struck me to listening to your book. The difference between competence and ability versus position in terms of leadership. I'm a leader because I have the position. So fuck you, do what I say. I'm the leader because I'm the dad. I'm the leader because I'm the man. Men are the leaders. I'm the leader because, and then there's this entitlement versus I'm the leader because if you threw us in some chaos, in just a few days, people will start looking towards me. Why? Because I have the competence, the ability, the strength, and the skills to lead. This came up in my mind and in my heart, really, man, listening to your story about Gabriel. And I just thought, that's leadership right there. Larry, when you were talking about receiving the diagnosis of a son that you were damn near certain there was no opportunity for survival. And you were talking about looking at your wife, looking at your boys, and having to be strong for your family. I thought, God damn, that's a man right there. That's a fucking leader right there, man. Taking on the weight of pain and unfortunate circumstance in life and deciding to take it on for the people in your life. That is fucking beautiful, man. That's leadership.
Appreciate that. Are you wanting me to talk a little bit about that?
Here's my question.
Yeah.
How does one cultivate the strength that they need for their family, for those that rely on them, so they can be a competent and able leader?
I haven't talked about this in a while.
Take your time, brother.
That was so it's interesting you bring up the dad edge. Are you familiar with Andy Frisella?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know you remember his co-host Vaughn?
No.
He used to call him the pastor of disaster. Yeah, Vaughn was his producer on the podcast when it was the MF CEO for, for probably like 3 years. And it was Andy and Vaughn, and Vaughn's a good friend of mine. And Vaughn was the actual, Vaughn's true job, like what he did for a living before he worked for Andy was he was a ghostwriter and an editor. So like he and I were friends, and that was the first book I ever wrote. And it's kind of funny you're talking about the Dad Edge, because I look at the Dad Edge book as like kindergarten, and what we're doing now is more master's degrees and college. So it's like the Dad Edge is a fine book. It still sells a ton of copies. I'm actually shocked. And because it's literally the bare basics. Like I remember writing that book, and I did it under the instruction of Vaughn. Like he's like, write this as if you're writing it to your best friend. Like just teaching him the simple basics that you've learned that have helped you just pivot this whole thing with being a husband and father. And like literally it's nine skills, nine different hacks really is what the book is all about, but it's so simple. And then that last chapter about Gabriel, it was supposed to be 8 chapters book, right? Very simple book. And Vaughn looked at me, and we had just got done going through that whole ordeal with losing our son. And Vaughn goes, I'm going to push you to do something you don't want to do. And I was like, okay. And he goes, I want you to write another chapter. And I'm like, okay. He's like, you need to write about this entire experience about losing your son. And I'm like, are you kidding? And I was like a month from everything going down. I was like, Vaughn, you're insane, man. I can't even talk about that, more or less write about it. He goes, that's why I need to write about it. He goes, you've given a great book and 8 chapters on guys to get through the simple stuff, but you have failed big time on helping men get through the big stuff. And I'm like, I was like, I'll think about it. And dude, it took me, I think, about 2 months to write that last chapter, because I had to do it in breaks, because it really, really challenged me to talk about it in a way, because I had to reflect upon the whole thing. And I sent it over to Vaughn, and I remember going to breakfast with him, and I put the manuscript in front of him. I was like, I hate you. I was like, that was the hardest work I've ever done in my life. And then he read it, and he goes, that's why you needed to do it. He goes, because in my opinion, that was the best chapter. So yeah, in 2015, in 2014, we got pregnant, and we were happy about it, and it wasn't really expected. We're like, okay, cool. And then because my wife was, I think, above the age of 35, they had to do like blood work and an ultrasound that was earlier than normal. So basically what we found out was our son had a very rare condition that was terminal, and it was called trisomy 13. And basically what that means is you have a 60% chance of losing the pregnancy. Or if you go all the way to birth, the child will probably only live for 2 days. And that was a huge crossroads. We were like, and we held that from our 2 older boys, because at the time they were just 6 and 8. And I was like, that was the hardest thing I'll never forget being in the office, and I'm like, are you saying our son's not going to live? Like, is that what you're telling me? Like, I was in such denial. And they're like, yeah. And they said, if we can't advise you either way, but when people get this diagnosis, they usually terminate the pregnancy because the child's not going to live. And our OBGYN was even like, it's sort of a humane thing to do, because then the child won't go through any pain. And we were faced with that one. And we thought about it. And to be honest, we decided to do it. And it was against both of our faith to do it. But we thought it was humane. And I'll never forget, man, I've known my wife for a long time. It was not sitting well with my wife. It was kind of like the best decision out of the worst options, right? And I'll never forget being in our bedroom the night before we were going to go. And I was just like, it just wasn't feeling right. And I guess from a leadership standpoint, a leader has to voice where he's at, and to be able to share it in a very authentic way and check in with people, versus like, I know we agreed upon this, we're doing it anyway. And I went to my wife that night and I said, hey, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I just, I just don't know. Like I just not, something feels very wrong about it. It also feels very wrong to go full bore with this. And this is your body too. I was like, but I don't feel right about it. And she just like, oh my God, I'm so glad you said something, because I don't feel right about it either. I was like, well, let's just not do it right now. And we were kind of edging on that cliff of like, if you don't do it by a certain time, then it becomes a much more invasive procedure and that kind of thing. So, we did something that I always encourage all leaders to do. And it's hard as hell for a lot of leaders to do. And that's go ask for help. That's so hard for us to do. Cause like, well, if I'm the leader, I don't need help. I should just make the decision. We went and asked for help, and we went to a counselor. We went to a counselor that we trusted, and he guided us through a decision, and we made the decision to go full term, or for my wife to carry him as long as if she was going to miscarry. And here's where I can tell you, walking out of that, making that decision was so freeing, but insanely terrifying. Because we were like, what are we doing? Is this wrong? And we really made that decision through our moral compass. And we said, this was the message. It's going to be hard for me to say again. But it's not just about me and Jessica. It's about the message that it sends to the family. Sooner or later, we were going to have to answer to that, to God. And most importantly, the thing that was on our radar was our boys. And what was I going to say when Ethan and Mason, at the age they are now, 17 and 15, whatever happened with Gabriel? Oh, we terminated the pregnancy. What message does that send to them? And so we decided that's never a message. That's never a message that we will stand on, ever. So the message was this. This child, and every child that we've had, was created out of love. And this child will pass away knowing love, no matter what way he goes, whether that's being miscarried, whether that's in our arms after he's born. But that's the cross we're willing to bear, because we refuse to buy into the fact that we're going to take the easy way out. And we refuse to send a message to the boys. It just got too hard, so we gave up. Because nobody will ever give up on anybody in our family, no matter what. And that message was more important to make sure that my boys knew it, that it was important to Jessica that the boys knew it. And it was something, to be honest, was so hard. But I look back on that, and it was such an experience of love and strength that in otherwise you wouldn't have expected. Because Jessica and I, here we are, that was 8 years ago. And I know for a fact, had we made that horrible decision to terminate, it would have been something like, let's not ever talk about that. Like that,
Yeah.
It would have been something so dark, and I think for both of us, and so sinister, to be honest, quite frankly, it might have torn us apart as a family.
Yeah.
Like it might have been something we've held so badly as that we would have been guilt ridden. So instead we'd made the hard choice that was hard in the beginning, but it would turn out to be better now, that was not the path. And what I'll tell you is that here we are, on June 8th, every single year, we have a birthday cake for Gabriel, because that was the day he was supposed to be born. My wife did miscarry him 3 days after Christmas in 2014. He was 23 weeks along at the time. And instead of thinking about it as something devastating, we choose to celebrate that was a path that we all walked through. And the last and final thing I'll say is this. After we lost him, we went to the hospital because we had to. And they gave us a butterfly. And we're like, what's the butterfly for? And they said, every child that dies, whether they're full term or miscarried, the belief is that they turn to a butterfly. And I'll get chills saying this, but dude, it never fails. Every single time we are on a family vacation, a family hike, we're in the outdoors, we're going to go to a pumpkin patch here. I guarantee there's going to be a butterfly that will be circling us at some point. It has never failed. There's always and we have a whole photo album dedicated to it. We'll be walking through something and a butterfly will land on top of my hat. We had a butterfly. This was 3 years ago during COVID. We went on a float trip. There was a butterfly that landed on my oldest son's leg. We have so many pictures of it. And then it was on his finger. The thing hung out with us for 2.5 hours. And then after we got off the water, it stayed on my son's finger. We got in the car. It landed on my wife's shoulder. We got out of the car. We got into our cabin. My wife walked up to the deck and was sitting outside, and it was on her other shoulder. It literally hung out with us for over 2 hours. And so like we choose to embrace that, you know, and that's meaningful to us.
Man, thank you so much for sharing that story with me, bro.
No problem.
The hard decision that you made, that's one of the really interesting things that I noticed about the way that you recounted it in the book and then the way you're talking about it now is that we are headed for hell regardless. And which hell is more aligned with our structure, our family, who we are, what we believe. Yeah. And it's so encouraging to hear that through that. I mean, I'm with you, man. I get these tears in my eyes and chills all over my body talking about Gabe showing up, flapping those wings, baby. You know, that is so awesome, bro. And to see life come back with the love, with the hug, you know, that I know that you're a Christian man. The Bible says that the Lord gives and takes away. And that is so beautiful to see where the pain comes in. So are these beautiful reminders of some sense of divinity, some sense of love throughout it. And that those moments you get to experience now with the butterfly are such a reminder of that time and that experience that you had when you guys do the birthday cake. It's like we fucking did the thing that we felt was right. We held the line. And I set that example for my boys. And that is fucking gangster, man. That is awesome. And I love it so much, bro. That is leadership. In my mind, that is the leadership that I wanted to highlight with you today, is when you go to the counselor and say, what should I do? That, like you said, that's what most leaders don't feel like they can do, because there's this archaic idea of the leader knows. The leader doesn't know. The leader's going to find out. The leader will find out. The leader has the responsibility to find out. And you know what? If I don't know because half my brain's filled up with movie quotes, I'm going to go to a damn counselor because right. I got a family that relies on me, and I'm going to make sure I have checked this decision and thought it through and prayed about it and meditated on it and sought any insight so that way I protect my family. Larry, you're an awesome leader. You're an amazing dad, and you're a fucking great guy, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I have to say, it surprises me that you're 26. You come across to me as like an old soul, and I mean that as a compliment. And by the way, dude, I am very envious of that face sweater. I cannot grow something like that. And you're only 26. Things on point, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, bro. I appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you, man. I really appreciate those words. It means a lot to me, man. For people listening, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope so much that you have had the experience of looking at leadership maybe in a different lens. That's all that I want to do with this episode with the wonderful Larry Hagner, is inspire you to just consider, leadership. Does that mean being a threat and being more powerful than those that submit to you? Or does it mean being devoting yourself to being more competent, more able, more strong, and being willing to experience the pains that life's taken you through as a way to widen your heart so that you can lead the people that rely on you? So with lots of love and just lots of love. Thank you so much for listening. And Larry, thank you so much for joining me today, bro, and helping me with this episode.
My pleasure, my man. This was really cool. You're doing really good work in the world.
Thanks, you too.